Speak No Evil is out in theaters, new psychological horror starring James McAvoy, Mackenzie Davis, and Scoot McNairy. It's a remake of a 2022 Danish-Dutch co-production under the same title, which honestly made it baffling to me when I first saw the trailer. Why would you remake such a fresh movie? It's not even 2 years. That was already rather good. There's nothing to improve upon it, really. And even more so, I thought that the marketing campaign for this was disastrous because it spoiled essentially the entire plot in the trailer. So I wasn't going to see it because, why would I? I saw the previous film. But then I saw it getting positive reviews and people mentioning that in the final act it actually does its own thing. It departs from the original film. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna give it a chance. I'll check it out. So the setup is still exactly the same. A couple with a daughter, in this version they're Americans living in London. They're having a vacation in Italy and they meet a similar family that normally lives in Devon, a married couple with a young son who has a speech disorder. They hit it off, like one another, and then the Devon couple invites the London couple over for a nice weekend at their farm. They do end up going, and what initially seems like a nice getaway pretty quickly becomes more and more sinister. So let me put it like this. About 75% of the film is still exactly the same as the original. Some of the scenes are just repeated verbatim. It's still a psychological horror about not standing up for yourself, about complying with things you're not okay with because you want to be nice, or you want to save face, or you want to maintain good manners. It's about not being assertive, and the movie even repeats a scene from the original, which I actually loved, which encompasses the whole premise, the whole thesis of the film in one simple piece of dialogue when one of the protagonists asks the villain, "Why are you doing this?" And he says, "Because you let us." So then in the final act, the film does in fact end up doing its own thing, which in general I would consider a good thing. It justifies its existence by not just being a shot-for-shot remake. However, the bad news is what it does is worse than the original film. See, in the previous movie, the final act plays out. The way the final act plays out into the ending is just incredibly bleak and cynical and depressing. And this version instead goes for action, shootout, explosions, and a Hollywood-style fight for your lives, which I think is pretty stupid. However, and this is the second however, I do think it manages to somewhat save itself at the very end because of what it does with the characters of Ant and Patty. Without spoiling anything, I think the way their shared final scene plays out is very chilling and also quite depressing, and manages to somewhat elevate the otherwise bland action finale. Other than that, worth mentioning are the performances. James McAvoy is spectacular, as he usually tends to be, very magnetic central performance. I thought Scoot McNairy is also very good in a much more subtle way. He's not as flashy. He sort of has to play this utter spineless coward who doesn't stand up to himself, who can't say no to anybody. Others are fine as well. Dan Ho, who plays the little boy, does a very good job. But at the end of the day, I do think that despite trying to do something new and fresh, that something is vastly inferior to what the original film opted for. And as a result, the remake falls short, even though I still think it's an okay film. I would say that recommending it depends on where you're coming from. If you've seen the original, there's absolutely no need to see this, unless you're a real film nerd like me. If you haven't seen the original, then I would say go watch that instead. It's a much more powerful film.